My stepdad pushed me at the Christmas table. I fell to the ground in front of the whole family. But what he didn't know is that very night, when he woke up, he'd have 47 missed calls. The moment his hand landed on my shoulder, I knew it wasn't just an accident. There was nothing playful about it. His fingers dug into my skin, hard enough to knock the breath from my chest. The room went silent. I could feel the weight of every eye in the room on me, but it wasn't concern. It was more like they were waiting for me to crumble. I looked up at him, my stepdad. He stood there, towering above me, his face frozen in a look of contempt. "That seat belongs to my real daughter," he said, his voice cold, like a blade scraping over ice. "Get out." The words hit harder than the shove. They weren't just about the seat at the table. It was his way of reminding me that I didn't belong. I had never really belonged. I stood up slowly, tasting the metal of blood in my mouth from where I had bitten my lip. The sting in my palms, where I had hit the hardwood, was nothing compared to the heat burning in my chest. My eyes scanned the room. My mom's face was red, her eyes darting from me to him. She wasn't angry, though. She wasn't even worried. She was embarrassed, maybe even more than I was. "Just sit somewhere else, Ava," she whispered, like I was the problem here. She didn't even look at me. She didn't even look at what he had just done. Emily, his daughter, sat at the end of the table, her face down, pretending to adjust her bracelet, avoiding eye contact. She wasn't cruel. No, she wasn't. She was just too used to being the girl worth defending. The girl who was always right. The girl who never had to fight for a place at the table. I didn't say anything. I didn't even speak. The silence was heavy, suffocating. It wasn't the kind of silence that protected you from the pain. It was the kind of silence you felt when everyone around you was too scared to make noise. When they were all just waiting to see how much humiliation you'd take before you finally broke. I didn't break. Not yet. I brushed the pine needles off my sweater, wiped the dust from the floor, and let the sting in my hands fuel me. Enough. I walked out of the room, my heart thudding in my chest. I didn't go to the window seat, far from the table like he wanted me to. No. I walked straight to the kitchen. I needed air. I needed space. Mom followed me, whispering, "Don't make a scene." I turned around slowly, looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years, and said, "He pushed me in front of you, and you're worried about a scene." Her eyes went wide. She blinked at me, stunned into silence. Behind her, I could still hear him. Laughing, nothing had happened. Like I was nothing. That was the moment. The exact second I realized it had all been for nothing. All those years of shrinking myself down to fit into their version of family. The apologies. The silence. The pretending that I could somehow just slip into the background and disappear. That moment, the shove, the way no one even cared, was the end of it all. I wasn't invisible anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just said quietly, "You will regret this." Soft enough that only she could hear. I wasn't threatening him. I wasn't even angry. I was simply choosing myself. Finally. That night, when I drove home, the Christmas lights blurred outside my windshield like a smear of watercolor. I wasn't crying. I thought I would. But there was nothing left to spill. Just a steady, quiet determination building up inside me. I didn't need to hide anymore. My phone buzzed once. Again. Then non-stop. Mom again, then Emily, then Mom. I didn't answer. Let them sit in the silence they'd created for me all these years. Let them feel what it was like when the air was thick with the truth no one wanted to acknowledge. I wasn't the one who was going to disappear anymore. I didn't answer any of their calls that night. Not Mom. Not Emily. Not even him. The phone kept buzzing like it was trying to drag me back into their world. The world where I wasn't allowed to speak up, where everything was quiet, everything was broken. But not anymore. I parked the car in the driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel. The house felt so still, like it was holding its breath. I sat there for a while, just staring at the front door. Inside, the lights were dim, casting long shadows across the hallway. It was too quiet. Too empty. When I finally got out of the car and walked inside, the house felt colder than I remembered. It had always been cold, in its own way. No warmth. No comfort. Just silence. I kicked off my shoes, letting them fall to the floor with a soft thud. I hung my coat by the door, like I had done 1,000 times before, but tonight it felt different. I was different. The kitchen lights flickered above me as I reached for the kettle. The steady drip of the sink echoed through the room, making the silence feel even heavier. I poured water into the kettle, waiting for it to heat. The steam rose in gentle swirls, soft and almost soothing. But my mind was 1,000 miles away from comfort. Wasn't angry. Not yet. But I was starting to feel something else. Something sharp. Something that felt like the edges of an old wound being opened again. That shove at the table. The way he'd said it. Real daughter. I could still hear the words in my head. The way he'd said them like I was less than nothing. It burned, not just because of how he treated me, but because it was the truth, in his eyes at least. I wasn't his daughter. I wasn't even close, but I wasn't nothing either. I pulled my phone from my pocket, staring at it for a moment. 47 missed calls. From Mom. From Emily. I didn't need to hear their voices to know what they were asking. They wanted me to fix it. They always did. I didn't answer. Not this time. The kettle whistled, and I jumped slightly, startled by the sound. I poured the hot water into a mug, watching the steam curl up into the air. I could feel my hands trembling, not from fear, but from something else. Something more like a quiet rage, simmering under the surface. I sat down at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around the mug. The heat from the cup spread through my hands, but it didn't warm the chill that had settled deep inside me. I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. The dinner, the shove, my mom's silence. She didn't even try to defend me. Not in any real way. She just let him push me. Let him make me invisible. Again. I looked at the screen of my phone. Another message. Mom, please Ava. I don't know what happened, but we need to talk. I deleted it without reading the rest. The words felt too familiar. The same old plea. The same old guilt. I was tired of it. Tired of being the one who had to fix everything. I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes for a moment, trying to block out the noise in my head. I could still hear the echo of the shove, of the words he'd said. They kept replaying over and over, each time louder than before. I didn't want to be part of that. Part of this family where I wasn't even allowed to sit at the table. I didn't want to shrink anymore. I didn't want to hide from the truth just to keep things quiet. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this was the moment. This was where it started. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to make them comfortable with who I was. I needed to make myself comfortable in my own skin. For the first time in years. I got up from the table, my movements slow but steady. I had to do this. I had to stop waiting for someone else to fix it. To stop waiting for them to see me. I went to the desk and pulled out a folder from the drawer. I started sorting through old papers. The things my mom had asked me to organize over the years, bills, statements, agreements, receipts. I'd never looked at them too closely before. I just helped her with whatever she needed. But tonight, I needed something different. I started pulling out the documents that mattered. The ones that showed what he had done. The ones that proved how he'd manipulated everything, how he'd put the house repairs in her name, how he'd left her carrying the financial burden for years. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even looking to hurt him. I just wanted her to know the truth. To understand how much of this had been his doing, how much of the weight she had been carrying wasn't hers to bear. By the time the clock hit midnight, I had everything I needed. The truth laid out in black and white, the pieces of the puzzle fitting together. He had never taken responsibility for anything, and now, neither could she. But I wasn't going to leave her to figure this out on her own. I closed the folder, breathing in deeply. The first step was done. Now, I just had to show her what he had been hiding. What they had both been ignoring for so long. The phone buzzed again. I didn't answer it. Tomorrow, I'd take it to her. Tomorrow, I'd finally show her. The morning felt different. The sun was still low, casting long shadows across the kitchen, but I could already feel the weight of the day pressing in. I had spent the entire night reviewing everything, documents, receipts, bills, all the things I had ignored for so long. But now, as I sipped my coffee, it all felt so clear. This was it. This was the moment where I stopped waiting. I checked my phone again. 48 missed calls now. My mom, Emily. Still no voicemail. I wasn't surprised. They couldn't let it go, not yet. But I couldn't answer. Not now. Not until I did what I needed to do. I took a deep breath, pushing my phone aside. I'd already decided what I was going to do. The plan was simple. Go to the lawyer. Make sure I had everything in order. And then face my mom. No more hiding. No more pretending things weren't as bad as they were. I was done with silence. By the time I got to the lawyer's office, I could feel the weight of the morning on my shoulders, heavier than I had anticipated. It wasn't just the paperwork. It was everything. The years of living in this distorted version of a family. The years I had spent shrinking into the background, hoping someone would notice. I had tried so hard to make things work. But now, I was standing at the edge of something bigger. The office smelled like fresh paper and coffee, the kind of sterile smell that felt almost reassuring in the way it was so neutral. The lawyer, Mr. Parks, was an older man with graying hair, his face warm and kind. He had that steady, quiet demeanor that made you feel like you could trust him without question. I needed that. I needed to feel like I wasn't alone in this. He stood up as I entered, and I handed him the folder I had been working on the night before. The documents were neatly arranged, showing the hidden costs and debts that Daniel had left in my mom's name, the things he had kept from her. I watched as he flipped through the pages, his face serious, taking it all in. I felt exposed, but I didn't care. Not anymore. Is this everything? Mr. Parks asked, looking at me over his glasses. I nodded. Yes, that's everything I could find. He exhaled slowly, flipping through a few more pages. This is a lot. Does your mother know any of this? I shook my head. No. He kept her in the dark. She never asked the questions. He made sure of it. Mr. Parks nodded. And what do you want to do with all this? I hesitated, but only for a moment. I want her to know the truth. I want her to understand what he's been hiding from her. Mr. Parks looked at me, then at the folder in front of him. You're not looking to destroy him. You just want to bring clarity. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I want her to see what she's been protecting without knowing it. I want her to understand that this isn't just about him. It's about her too. She deserves to know. He nodded again, thoughtful. All right. We can request a meeting? Neutral ground. Lay out the information calmly, without confrontation. I wasn't sure if I was ready for calm. I had never been good at staying calm when it came to my family. But I knew I had to do this. Not just for me, but for her. For us. I'm not trying to start a war, I said, my voice quieter now. But I'm done pretending that everything is okay when it's not. Mr. Parks stood up and shook my hand. We'll get this taken care of. I'll schedule the meeting for tomorrow afternoon. It's time to face it head on. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and fear. Tomorrow. As I left the office, the air outside felt colder than it had before. And the weight of what I was about to do settled deeper in my chest. I wasn't afraid of Daniel's anger anymore. What scared me was the moment I would have to face my mother and finally tell her the truth. It was one thing to see it for yourself. To read the numbers, the facts, the evidence. But to stand there and look her in the eye. To make her see everything she had ignored for so long. That was the real test. The drive back was quiet, the car moving smoothly through the streets as I replayed the conversation in my head. When I got home, I didn't go straight inside. I stood there for a while, staring at the door, feeling the weight of the decision I had made. This was it. The moment where I stopped being afraid. Where I stopped being silent. I walked inside and made my way to the kitchen, setting the folder down on the table. I didn't have to wait long before I heard the familiar sound of my mom's footsteps behind me. "Ava," she said, her voice tentative. "We need to talk." I turned around slowly, meeting her eyes. I didn't have to say anything. She knew. "I know," I whispered. "I'm going to show you everything. The truth." Her face twisted in confusion, but she didn't pull away. Not this time. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to shrink back. I didn't want to go through with it. I didn't want to face my mother's confusion, her defensiveness, the way she would react when she finally understood just how much Daniel had controlled her life. But I had to. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. Not anymore. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she came in. I had already laid out the documents, the receipts, the bills, everything I had spent hours collecting. They were there, in black and white, the truth so undeniable that I almost wanted to look away. But I couldn't, not this time. "Mom," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "We need to talk. I need you to see something." She stood by the door, hesitant, unsure. "What is this about, Ava?" she asked, her voice small. "You said you wanted to show me something." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "It's about Dad. About everything he's been hiding from you. Everything he's been doing that you don't know about." Her face shifted, a flash of concern passing through her eyes, but she didn't move closer. She stood still, waiting for me to continue. I slid the folder toward her, watching her hands tremble as she picked it up. She didn't say anything at first, just flipped through the pages slowly, her brow furrowing deeper with every document she read. "What is all this, Ava?" she asked, her voice growing tight. "What's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I let her see it. I let her see the debt, the bills in her name, the repairs Daniel had put off, the things he had made her carry without telling her. The things he had never paid for, but had still managed to convince her were her responsibility. She flipped through a few more pages, her face growing paler with every line. I could feel the tension in the air. The silence. It was the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're drowning, like you're waiting for someone to take a breath, to speak, to break the weight. "I don't understand," she whispered, still staring at the papers. "Why didn't he tell me?" "Because he didn't want you to know," I said, my voice firm but quiet. "He didn't want you to see the truth. He wanted to keep you in the dark so you wouldn't leave. So you wouldn't realize that you've been carrying everything on your own." She blinked rapidly, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. But I trusted him. I trusted that he was doing the right thing. "I didn't know." "I know," I said softly, "but that's the problem. You didn't know. And now you do." She sat down at the table, her hands shaking as she held the documents. I could see the cracks forming in the armor she had built around herself. The defenses she had relied on for so long. She wasn't just seeing the financial burden now, she was seeing the emotional one too. "I don't know what to do with this, Ava," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never asked him to handle it all. I just wanted things to be normal. I didn't want to rock the boat." "You didn't have to," I said, my voice gentle now. "You didn't have to." But you let him make you believe it was all your responsibility. He made you feel like you had no choice but to accept it. And I let you think that was okay. She reached for her phone then, her fingers trembling as she stared at the missed calls from Daniel. She had been ignoring them, just like I had. But this time, it felt different. This time, there was no pretending. There was no more silence to hide behind. Mom. I said, my voice catching. He's not the man you think he is. He never was. She didn't look up. She just stared at the screen, the silence in the room deafening. I could see her fighting with herself, the guilt and the fear warring inside her. She wanted to call him, wanted to go back to the way things were. But she couldn't. Not anymore. Don't call him, I said, my words cutting through the quiet. Don't go back to him, not yet. Not until you understand everything. She blinked at me, her eyes wide, as if hearing those words for the first time. You have to choose, Mom. You have to choose what's best for you now. Not for him. For you? The tears finally spilled over, but she didn't wipe them away. Instead, she set the phone down and looked at me for the first time. Really looked at me. There was a rawness in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before. It was as if she had been living in a fog, and now it was starting to lift. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know what he was doing to you. I could feel the years of silence between us shift, just a little. I know, Mom. I know. But it's okay, it's not too late. We sat there for a while. Not speaking, just letting the weight of everything settle in. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew it had to start here. It had to start with the truth. Do you think you can forgive me? She asked quietly, her voice tentative. I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just tired. But in a way that felt like release, not defeat. I don't know, I said softly. But I think we can start over. She nodded slowly, as if she finally understood what that might mean. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. The next day, I drove to the lawyer's office early in the morning. The streets were still quiet, the sun barely peeking through the trees. The whole world felt like it was still waking up. But I knew today was different. Today, I would finally make her see the truth. I parked outside, staring at the old brick building in front of me. The waiting room was empty when I walked in, the receptionist only glancing up briefly before returning to her paperwork. I sat down and flipped through the folder I had brought, making sure everything was in order. By the time the attorney's door opened, I felt like I had already made up my mind. No more hesitation. No more second-guessing. Nova. Mr. Parks said warmly, motioning for me to come in. I walked into his office, the quiet professionalism of the place offering some comfort. He gestured for me to sit. I've gone through everything. I believe we can handle this carefully, but it'll take some time. I nodded, trying not to let my anxiety show. I want to do this right. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to make sure my mom understands what she's been protecting. Mr. Parks nodded, his expression serious. We'll be careful. The goal isn't to destroy, it's to clarify. You've already made the hardest choice. Now, we just need to present the truth in a way that's as clear as possible. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle into my chest. I wasn't doing this for me. I was doing this for her. For my mother, who had lived in denial for so long, believing everything was fine when it wasn't. This wasn't about revenge. It was about helping her see who she had been protecting. Helping her break free from the chains he had wrapped around her. The meeting was scheduled for later that afternoon. I didn't speak much after that, the silence in the office stretching between us. It was a waiting game now. I would finally confront my mother, show her what I had seen, and hope that she would see the truth the same way I had. But I wasn't sure if she would. I wasn't sure how she would react, whether she would fight back, or just collapse under the weight of it all. The drive back was even quieter than the trip to the lawyer's office. My mind kept replaying everything that had happened over the past few days. The shove at the dinner table, the way my mom had looked at me, the fear in her eyes when she realized what Daniel had done. She had been so blind, so unwilling to face it. But now she had no choice. The truth was in front of her, and it would hit her harder than anything Daniel had ever done. When I walked back into the house, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in front of her. She hadn't moved. She hadn't answered any of his calls either. I noticed. A small, strange part of me felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she was starting to see it too. "Ava," she said softly when she saw me. Her voice was strained, like she didn't know where to begin. I sat down next to her, the silence between us heavier now. It wasn't just the weight of the moment. It was the weight of everything we had left unsaid for years. "Mom?" I said quietly, my voice steady, but there was a tremor of emotion underneath. "It's time for you to understand everything. I've already shown you the truth, but now you need to see it yourself. You need to know what he's been hiding from you." Her fingers shook as she reached for the papers in front of me. She stared at them, her face pale, her eyes wide as she skimmed the documents. I watched her, holding my breath, praying that this was the moment she would finally see it. After a long silence, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't believe this. I thought I knew everything." "You didn't," I said quietly. "And now you do." Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone again. I could see her hesitation, her desire to call him, to go back to the version of their life where everything was fine. But she didn't. She just stared at it for a long moment, her fingers hovering over the screen. "I thought I was protecting you," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought I was doing the right thing by staying. I never thought it was this bad." "I know, Mom. I know. But you don't have to protect him anymore. You can protect yourself now." She looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time in a long time. "I'm sorry, Ava. I should have seen it. I should have known." I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "It's not too late, Mom. You don't have to fix it all at once. You just have to start by seeing it. And then, you can choose what to do with the truth." She nodded slowly, her eyes still filled with uncertainty, but also something else. Something I hadn't seen before. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the beginning of her realizing that she could choose herself too. "I don't know what to do next," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But I know I can't keep living like this." "You don't have to," I said softly. "Not anymore." The silence between us was different now. It wasn't filled with fear or regret. It was just quiet. A kind of stillness that felt like the beginning of something new. Something uncertain, but real. We didn't say anything else for a while. We just sat there, holding on to the truth, as difficult as it was to face. But it was ours now. And that was enough for me. The next few days passed in a blur. It felt like I was moving through life on autopilot, my body going through the motions while my mind stayed locked on the meeting we had scheduled. It was all I could think about. The way my mom had looked at me after seeing the truth. The way the weight of the truth settled in her eyes. I could feel the shift inside her. But I didn't know if she was ready to move forward. I didn't know if she was ready to leave him. The call came early that morning, just as I was getting out of bed. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, its vibration pulsing against the wood. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. It was Daniel. I let it ring out, my finger hovering over the screen, debating whether to answer. I knew what he was going to say, his calm, practiced apologies, his empty reassurances. But I couldn't bear to hear it. Not anymore. I had heard enough of that to last a lifetime. By the time the meeting with the lawyer came around, I was already wound tight. The waiting room felt too small. The air too thick. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, could feel the tension building up inside me. I tried to breathe, but the weight of what was about to happen pressed down on me, pushing the air out of my lungs. When Mr. Parks called my name, I stood up without thinking, my legs a little shaky. The door clicked shut behind me as I walked into his office. This was it. The moment that would decide everything. "We're all set for today," Mr. Parks said, his tone reassuring but not soft. There was a professionalism in his voice that made me feel like I wasn't entirely alone in this. "I've scheduled the meeting for this afternoon. Your mother should be here any minute." I nodded, unable to speak. My throat felt dry, and my pulse raced. This wasn't just about confronting the truth. It was about breaking something that had been broken for years, about exposing the cracks in the family I had once tried to protect. But now, I had to let go. I couldn't keep holding it all in. A few minutes later, my mom walked in, looking smaller than usual. She had always been the calm, steady presence in my life, but now, I saw the cracks in her, too. The way her hands trembled slightly as she sat down, the way her eyes refused to meet mine. She was still processing everything. Still trying to understand how the man she had trusted could have hurt her this way. "Are you sure about this, Nova?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure," I said firmly, meeting her gaze for the first time in days. "You deserve to know the truth, Mom. You've always deserved to know." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced down at the papers in front of her, the same documents I had shown her at home. Her hands shook as she picked them up. Flipping through the pages slowly, I could see the shock in her face, the confusion, but also something else. Something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the beginning of a realization that she had been blind for too long. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" she asked, her voice a whisper now. "Why didn't you tell me what was going on?" "I didn't know how," I said softly. "I didn't know how to make you see it. You didn't want to see it. You kept believing that everything was fine." She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to hurt you, Nova. I didn't want to believe it. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. I didn't know how to respond." The truth was, I had spent so many years trying to ignore it too. Trying to convince myself that if I kept quiet, if I stayed out of the way, it would all just work itself out. But it didn't. And now, there was no going back. The door to Mr. Parks' office opened then, and a woman walked in, a neutral figure who had been hired to mediate the meeting. She introduced herself. Ike. But my mind wasn't on her. It was on my mom, and the way her face had fallen, like the weight of everything was finally crashing down on her. Mr. Parks spoke next, laying out the facts, the details of the financial manipulation Daniel had carried out over the years. Every word felt like a hammer striking the air, breaking the silence between us. But my mom didn't react the way I expected. She didn't cry, didn't yell. She just sat there, her face pale, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "This is all true, isn't it?" she asked quietly. "This is really happening." I nodded. "Yes, Mom. This is real. This is everything." I could see the way her mind was racing, the way she was piecing everything together. She wasn't just seeing the bills. She was seeing the pattern. She was seeing the way he had kept her in the dark, using her love for him to control her, to make her believe everything was her responsibility. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I don't know how to fix this." "You don't have to fix it," I said softly. "You just have to see it. You have to see what he's done. And then, you can decide what to do next." The silence between us stretched out again, but this time it was different. It wasn't full of fear or regret. It was full of possibility. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't carrying everything alone. My mom wasn't ready to leave Daniel, but she was starting to see the truth, and that was enough for now. As we walked out of the lawyer's office, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't closure. It was just a beginning. The beginning of something new, something neither of us had ever expected to face. But at least we were facing it together now. The days after the meeting passed slowly, like I was stuck in a waiting room, unable to move forward. My mom hadn't said much after we left the lawyer's office. She hadn't asked me any more questions, and I hadn't pushed her. I didn't know what else to say. What else could I say? The truth was out there, but it hadn't yet sunk in for her. It hadn't even begun to hit her in the way it needed to. Daniel, on the other hand, had been relentless. His calls kept coming, one after the other, until the sound of his name flashing on my screen became a dull ache in my head. Every time I saw his name, my chest tightened. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was trying to get to her through me, but I wasn't answering. Not anymore. I wasn't going to let him dictate how this story played out. Not for me, not for her. The worst part, though, was the silence that hung between me and my mom. We sat in the same room together, but it felt like there were miles between us. Every time I caught her looking at me, she quickly looked away. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't even shame. It was something else, something that felt like fear. Mixed with the growing realization that everything she thought she knew was built on a lie. I couldn't blame her for being scared. I didn't even know what to do next. But I knew that I couldn't give up on her. She came into the kitchen one afternoon, just before dinner. Her eyes a little redder than usual. I wasn't sure if it was because of the phone calls or something else. When she sat down, I didn't say anything. I just waited for her to speak, to finally break the silence between us. "Ava," she began, her voice small, almost hesitant. I don't know what to do. I can't just forget all of this, but I don't know if I'm ready to leave him." I stayed silent for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. I didn't know what the right response was. I didn't know if there was a right response. "I don't want to lose you, Mom," I said softly. "But I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. You deserve more than this." She looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. "I know, but it's not just about me, is it? It's about everything. About what he's done. About what I've let happen. I've been so focused on keeping the family together, on keeping the peace, that I've ignored everything else." I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers, giving it a gentle squeeze. "It's never too late to choose yourself, Mom. You don't have to stay because of me. You don't have to stay because of him. You need to do what's best for you." She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with the uncertainty I had seen so many times before. But this time, I saw something else. It was like she was finally seeing a way out, finally realizing that she didn't have to stay trapped in a life she hadn't chosen. "I don't know if I can leave him," she said, the words heavy with the weight of years of indecision. "But I'm trying to understand everything now. I'm trying to see it all for what it is." I nodded. "That's all I'm asking. Just start there." She took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, I saw a glimmer of resolve in her eyes. It wasn't the same look I had seen when she was still trying to protect him, still trying to believe in a family that didn't exist. It was different now. It was softer, gentler, but also stronger. Like she was finally beginning to understand the importance of choosing herself, of standing up for herself. "You're right," she said, her voice steadier now. "I've been blind to it all. I've let him manipulate me for too long." I felt a small sense of relief, but it wasn't enough yet. I knew this wasn't the end. It wasn't even close. But it was a start. And sometimes, a start was all you needed. She sat with me for a while after that, not saying much, but not needing to. We didn't have to fill the silence. We were both just thinking, processing. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if she would really leave him. I didn't know if anything would change at all. But for the first time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, it could. Later that night, after dinner, I heard her on the phone. I didn't know who it was with, but when she hung up, she looked different. Her face was set, like she had made a decision. "I've asked him to leave," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if he will, but I'm not going to let him keep controlling me." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" I asked, not quite sure if I had heard her right. "I told him it was over," she said, her voice firmer now. "I told him he had to go. I don't want him here anymore." I didn't know what to say at first. I wanted to hug her, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just nodded. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the resolution I had hoped for. But it was something. It was enough for tonight. I didn't know what would happen in the days to come, but for the first time, I felt like my mom was finally choosing herself. And that, more than anything, was worth holding on to. The days that followed were quiet. I didn't hear from Daniel at all after that phone call. And my mom, despite her hesitation, began to find her own way through the mess he had left behind. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy. But it was something. It was progress. Mom stayed with her sister for a few days after she asked Daniel to leave. I didn't hover. I didn't call every few hours, checking on her. For the first time, I wasn't trying to fix everything. I was letting her take her own steps at her own pace. I didn't want to be the one to push her, not anymore. She needed to find her own way, and I needed to let her. I spent a lot of time alone during those days, sitting with the quiet. The house felt emptier without her there, but there was a strange sense of calm in the stillness. For the first time in a long while, the weight of Daniel's presence wasn't hanging over us. It was just us now, my mom and me, and even though we weren't entirely okay yet, we were on the road to getting there. It was late in the evening when my phone buzzed again. I didn't recognize the number. My heart skipped, but I didn't hesitate. I answered. "Ava." My mom's voice came through, shaky but steady. "I need to talk to you." I sat up straighter, the familiar tension creeping back into my chest. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something in her tone told me this wasn't just another call about where to go next. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice cracking slightly, "about everything. About him. About us." She paused, the silence stretching between us. "I don't know if I can go back to him. But I need to make sure I'm doing this for the right reasons, not out of guilt, or fear, or anything else." I felt a tightness in my throat. This was the moment, the one I had been waiting for. I had seen her start to make decisions, but this was the first time she was truly questioning what was best for her. "You don't have to go back to him," I said gently. "You don't owe him anything. You've done everything you could for him, but it's time to start doing for yourself." She didn't answer right away, but I could hear her breathing, slow and deep. "I don't know how to do that," she whispered, almost to herself. "I don't know how to stop being afraid." "You just have to choose," I said, my voice steady, trying to give her something to hold on to. "It's not going to be easy, but you don't have to do it alone anymore. I'm here. I'll always be here." There was a long pause, and then I heard her breathe out, a sound like she had finally released a breath she had been holding for years. "I think I'm ready," she said quietly. "I think I'm ready to be the person I've been putting off being." A wave of relief washed over me, and for the first time in so long, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. She was making the choice. She was choosing herself. "I'm proud of you," I whispered, though the words felt too small for the moment. "You've been so strong." "I've been pretending," she replied, her voice stronger now. But I'm not pretending anymore. I'm done with that. Later that week, when I met her for coffee, she looked different. Smaller, maybe, but in a way that felt right. She didn't have the weight of pretending anymore. Her shoulders weren't as tense, her eyes weren't as guarded. She had made her choice. I'm staying with my sister for now, she said, folding her hands around her coffee cup. I think it's time for me to really think about what I want. What I need. I smiled at her, but it wasn't the smile I had given her before. It was different now, softer. Like I was finally seeing her for the first time, the way she had always been there, beneath the layers of everything she had put on to keep us together. I think that's a good idea, I said. You deserve to have a chance at happiness too, Mom. She smiled back at me, the kind of smile I hadn't seen in a long time. I know. I think I might be ready for it. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the end of the story. But it was a beginning. A new chapter. And for the first time, I truly believed that things could get better. One step at a time. As we walked out of the cafe together, I could feel a weight lifting from both of us. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, it felt like we were walking toward it, together. The calls from Daniel slowed after that. At first, there were still a few, still the attempts to reach her, but they stopped coming as often. Eventually, they stopped altogether. I didn't know if he was sorry. I didn't know if he would ever change. But I knew that we didn't have to wait around to find out anymore. We had our own lives now. And for the first time in years, I felt a quiet kind of peace settle in. It wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about punishing anyone. It was just about taking control of our own lives. And that was enough for me. My mom had chosen herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward healing, for both of us.